Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Conservative Corner. I'm Elliot Margolis. I'm here with my co-host Gail Burke, and today is another day that could live in infamy, because today is June 24th, and the Supreme Court righted a wrong that they did almost 50 years ago. Let me explain. The Supreme Court almost 50 years ago had what we call Roe versus Wade, which allowed abortions throughout the country. They didn't have a right to do that. The reason they didn't have a right to do that was because the Constitution doesn't have the abortion in it whatsoever. What the Constitution says is we have states' rights. And with states' rights, the states have the right to allow or disallow abortions or anything else that comes across their way. States' rights. Well, in this case, Roe versus Wade, it made a federal law of allowing abortions. But that's not illegal according to the Constitution. So therefore, this Supreme Court did the right thing by reversing Roe v. Wade. It does not reverse the fact that you can or cannot have an abortion. You can still have an abortion. It's in the state's decisions whether or not you have an abortion and what the rules are for abortion. So for anybody that wants an abortion, you can still have it. And if a state says we're not going to allow abortions, nothing prevents you from driving to another state to have an abortion. So there really is no major change in the abortion laws. It's just that it's not a federal decision, it's a state decision. And when you listen to the garbage that Nancy Pelosi spewed it out today about women's rights, the rights for women haven't changed a bit. Nothing has changed except it's states' rights. The Democrats are going to use that, or should I say the liberals are going to use that for political purposes. The Supreme Court is not involved in politics. The Supreme Court is involved in law and order. That's what this is all about, the Constitution, defending the Constitution. And the liberals don't like the Constitution. They've proven that time and time again. This is a perfect instance of that. And the Supreme Court today righted a wrong. Gail?
Well, as many of you probably know by now, several weeks ago, someone at the Supreme Court, they still don't know whether it was a clerk or somebody else within the court, that leaked a memo written by Samuel Alito, Justice Alito, that indicated that that's the way the Supreme Court was looking to go. Nothing was set in stone, nothing. And that set off riots all over the country. You had these extremists marching in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes, not the liberal Supreme Court justices, but the conservative ones. They were marching to protest. Nothing had been said or done yet, and yet they took to the roads and off they went. They were on TV for weeks, and they were assuming that that would happen. Well, the problem is that starts violence. The president added the fuel to the fire, as did Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and many of the Democrats in Congress. This is what causes problems in this country. So today, the ruling came down. They did it. They overturned Roe v. Wade. And it's interesting to note that when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was alive, she said it was a bad decision for the courts to have Roe v. Wade in the first place. And what happened over the years as time went on, it started out with abortion is legal, okay? It has to be within a certain time frame. Well, over time, that disappeared. And it was at the point now where you could get an abortion right up to the moment of birth, and in some states, even after birth, the baby could be killed. Enough is enough. So now we're back to where it used to be. The states have the rights to do anything they want with it, and this way the people themselves can actually vote on it. The other side, in the meantime, has been fired upon as far as people closing down and burning down birth life centers. This was the pro-life answer to young people who found themselves pregnant, whatever the circumstances, they were poor or they were unmarried or whatever. They offered an alternative that is still available. And many of these children have been adopted. But unfortunately, over the last 50 years, we've had 63 million babies aborted. And we know from a few years ago what happened with those aborted babies. Some doctors at Planned Parenthood were actually selling baby parts to the highest bidder. I mean, it was absolutely disgusting. And now we have a chance to start new and see where we go from there.
And you know, the inconsistency of liberals, Gail, it's okay. You don't want to kill a criminal. Somebody that's murdered somebody, you should not kill them. Somebody that's attacked somebody shouldn't even have bail. But it's okay to kill a baby. How does that compute?
Well, they don't call it a baby. They call it a fetus.
Right.
And it's easier to do that and think of it as just a bunch of cells when it's a little tiny baby.
But here's my question. In today's day and age, forget 50, 60 years ago, in today's day and age, is there really an excuse for somebody to have an unwanted pregnancy? There are so many ways to avoid pregnancy. I mean, between the pill, the condom, the day after pill, there's so many ways that it's pretty hard to, you know, if you don't want to have the baby, you shouldn't get pregnant. And here's the other thing. People say that women should have a right to do what they want with their bodies. No argument. Once you're pregnant, it's not your body. You're sharing that body with another human being. And that is a differentiation that the liberals don't want you to know about. But it's just not right. There are reasons why maybe an abortion is justified, and every state will make that decision on their own. But just to be able to kill a person who might be 5 or 6 months old or 7 or 8, you know, in the last trimester, that's unjustified.
That's terrible.
And, you know, we've got to start obeying, you know, certain laws. You can't justify killing a person who may not be born yet, but allowing somebody who's killed 10 people to live the rest of their life. I don't see it.
Well, I think if more people understood what abortion really was and what happens to the baby, I think they would have second thoughts about it. I'm not going to go into detail. It's just too gruesome. But the fact is, when you turn things back to the states, the people in the state have a chance to vote on how they feel. Maybe the people will say, we want abortion. That's up to the states. That's up to the people that live in those states to vote on that. And I think that's what the founding fathers intended. Limited government from on high and states' rights. and that's the way we should be going.
It's worked for over 200 years.
It has.
You know?
Yeah, it
So-
really has. Whether it's
And the thing that really bothers me is that the liberals today, if they don't like a decision, number one, the decision is wrong. Number two, they can justify burning buildings, looting, destroying property. And what bothers me more than anything is that the liberal Democrats in Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Detroit, St. Louis, pick a city, they allow it to happen. They absolutely allow it to happen. That's okay. Now, who's paying for that? You know who's paying for it? You are. And you know how you're paying for it? You're paying for it because your insurance rates go up, because the people who had their property destroyed go to the insurance company, the insurance pays for the damage, and then your rates go up. So it's unjustified behavior, and who gives the federal government, the state representatives, the congressmen, who gives them the right to decide what laws are okay to obey and what laws are not okay to obey? It just doesn't make sense. You know, that was a question I wanted to ask Seth Moulton on his last town meeting, but naturally, I didn't get called on. Okay? No, at his last town meeting, not one question was asked about illegals, about the border, about inflation, nothing. It was all, oh, Seth, you're doing such a good job. Thank you very much. That's not what a town meeting is supposed to be.
No.
It was all on the phone. They basically censored any question they didn't want to have asked. And, you know, really, if I guess my question to Seth Moulton and to all of Congress would be, if you don't obey the laws of the country, why should I?
Well, I think also that even before this decision was made to overturn Roe v. Wade, Justice Brett Kavanaugh was threatened by a man who was armed, who got his address, went to his house, threatened him, threatened his children, and was arrested. But it took Nancy Pelosi a whole week, to finally say, okay, yes, the justices should have protection for themselves and their families. At first, she didn't even want to protect the families, but then she relented. Why did it take a whole week for that to happen?
Because it was a conservative judge and not a liberal judge. Because
Well,
if it was a liberal judge, it would have happened right away.
On January 6th, immediately, like the next day, the National Guard was there. They were putting up a fence. And who were they protecting? Congress. They were protecting the Congress. And that involved Nancy Pelosi, so that was more important.
Wait a minute, you just brought something up that I don't understand.
What's that?
Walls don't work. So if walls don't work, why did they put one around the Capitol?
Well, the fences work.
I mean, you know.
Fences apparently, in their eyes,
A fence is not a wall.
work better than walls.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. The Supreme Court did another very interesting decision yesterday. And basically what they said was, in New York, yes, you can carry a concealed weapon, and
You don't have to give a reason.
you
for
don't
doing
have to
it.
give a reason because, you know, the New York law said you have to give a reason if you want to carry a concealed
And then
weapon.
it has to go by a board that will either sanction it or not.
Yeah. You know, what's that all about? In today's day and age, you can't walk down the city of New York City and not be accosted by somebody because there's no law anymore in New York City.
Well,
You
they have a mayor that used to be a cop, interestingly enough, but that's decided that, well, we have to let more prisoners out of prison, and they need to be rehabbed, Well, in the meantime, they're out of prison on the streets, many of them committing even more crimes. So the crime rate in New York is escalating, just as it is in Chicago, Seattle, Portland, a lot of major cities, in Boston as well. And it's all about, according to the liberals, we have to get rid of the guns. Well, it's not the guns, it's the people who get the guns illegally. They don't care about the laws, they get them anyway. And those are the people we have to be afraid of and have to protect ourselves against.
The majority opinion, authored by Justice Clarence Thomas, held that New York's proper cause requirement for obtaining a concealed carry license violated the Constitution because it prevents law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right, subject to the entirely different body of rules that other Bill of Rights guarantees, Thomas wrote in the opinion. The exercise of other constitutional rights does not require individuals to demonstrate to the government officers some special need. The Second Amendment right to carry arms in public for self-defense is no different. New York's proper cause requirement violates the 14th Amendment by preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms.
New York is just one of 6 states that may issue licensing frameworks for the carrying of firearms in public, meaning that government officials have broad discretion to deny public carry permits for law-abiding applicants. These 6 states generally require, as does New York, that applicants demonstrate they have good cause or proper cause for wanting to carry a firearm in public. Now, why should anyone have to give a reason for wanting to carry a firearm in public? They have the right to do it. The government has no right to require them to answer the reasons why. And I'll tell you that when the founders established the Second Amendment, they did that for a very good reason, because they were under the British rule and they had just declared their independence. They were protecting themselves against the government. Well, as we read in the newspapers and we see on television, we need the same right to protect ourselves, not only from the criminals, but also from the government.
Well, that's a good point. We need to protect ourselves from the government, particularly from the liberals, because they're trying to take over the government, and they're trying to reduce our rights. Now, here's a very important point, okay? A concealed weapon is usually a fairly small weapon. It can't be used for, mass murders. The people that are committing these mass murders, or the people that commit crimes, they don't care what the law is. They're not following the law. Most of these weapons that are used in these mass murders are not even legal weapons. People, we have about 400 million guns in this country.
And the numbers are growing.
And the numbers are growing because, why are the numbers growing? Because of all the crime that the liberal Democrats are allowing in the big cities. You got to protect yourself.
Well, look at the people, the illegals coming across the border. The people that live in those cities and towns near the borders are overwhelmed by the number of immigrants, illegal immigrants, coming across, and many of them have had their homes broken into, they've had their cattle and their sheep harmed. I was watching TV the other night, and this woman was talking about being inside of her home, and she saw several strangers coming into her yard. They came up on her porch and tried to break into her house. Fortunately, she and her husband had firearms to protect themselves. They didn't have to shoot anybody, but the idea is you need to feel safe within your own home. And we know that many of the illegals coming across the border are not good people. They're criminals and gangs.
How does taking weapons away from law-abiding citizens hurt anybody? I mean,
It's
and
the
yet
fear.
our government says, okay, if you want to come into this country, come in. We're not going to check and see who you are. Bring in all the drugs that you want. We have more people dying daily from the illegal drugs that are coming across the country today than we have being killed by guns. And yet, our government doesn't seem to care about the illegal drugs coming in. Our government doesn't care about people from the age of 20 to 45 who are dying daily because of the fentanyl that's coming into this country. We don't care about that. The reason we don't care about it is because that's not where the votes are. The votes are with the guns, and therefore, you have a mass murder, and all of a sudden you have legislation about guns. That's what they care about. They don't care about the fentanyl coming in, killing us. I don't understand it.
No,
but
the
again,
priorities
it goes to show that the government chooses what laws that they've passed not to obey. Then they want us to obey them.
Think about what would have happened in some of these school shootings if the teachers had been allowed to carry guns, or if somebody in the building were there with a gun. Many of these children would have been saved. We know in the Uvalde school shooting, that was a terrible, terrible thing. The police were there. The sheriff was there. He refused to go in. Imagine if the teacher in that classroom had had a gun and was able to save some of the children and maybe have saved herself in the process. But that didn't happen. And it's all because the bad guys, the criminals that have these guns, who intend to commit murder, know that certain places like schools and churches are gun-free zones. That has to change. Otherwise, we're going to see more and more of them.
And if teachers and or principals and or somebody in the school had a weapon, nobody has to know who it is.
That's right.
It's concealed. And to get a concealed weapon, you have to be trained. So you're trained, you have a concealed weapon, nobody knows about it. If, unfortunately, something were to happen, a problem can be solved very quickly. That's what's important here, is solving a problem. And, once people understand that it's not a gun-free zone, they're not going in there. It's real simple.
Right. Well, I had some comments thrown at me today about this very issue. And some of the comments were, well, the teacher's going to have to lock the gun in a closet. How's she going to get to it in time? Or the teacher's not going to leave a gun laying around. What if the kid's got it? The teacher can carry it with her. She's not going to put it in a closet. What good is that? If it's locked up in a closet someplace and some maniac comes in wielding a gun, she could be dead before she even got to it. The idea is that teachers, if they want to, can choose to protect themselves and the children. That doesn't mean that every teacher in the school is going to be required to have a gun. Not at all. Some schools do have an officer available to quell any potential shootings, but that's not always the case. The person isn't always in the right place at the right time, as we've seen time after time after time. And it's terrible. It's horrible that your child can't go to school and feel safe. And that's the bottom line. And the Supreme Court has it right. This Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, decided this. And we finally have a Supreme Court that is more apt to study the Constitution, to relay what it means, to discuss it, and to figure out the real Constitution and what the founders meant by what they did. This took a lot of time to make this decision and a lot of thought, and they didn't do it willy-nilly. But I think the people that are protesting need to be informed. Many of them are ill-informed, disinformed, or not informed at all. So we need to have a more informed public, whether it's guns, whether it's abortion, whatever it is. We need to have students in school learn civics. Civics isn't taught much anymore. The things that are being taught are things like CRT. What a waste of time. Pitting one colored child against another. That's not what this is all about. Our country isn't about that kind of thing.
CRT is actually a racist concept, and that's unacceptable. You know, kids are born, they don't know black from white or Asian. They know a kid and they have fun with kids. By teaching CRT, we're teaching racism.
Well, you see, and that's the rub, because many teachers will say, we're not teaching CRT. Oh, really? You might call it DEI, diversity, ethnicity, or and whatever the I is, I've forgotten. But anyway, it's the same thing, and it's a racist way of looking at things. You can't do this to our children. They will grow up to be racist. They will grow up to hate. And I will tell you, as a parent, that's not what I would want for my child. And I think most parents today are finding the same thing. But we're almost out of time, Elliot. As usual, we've had a good show. We've had a lot of commentary back and forth, a lot of good discussion. And we hope to continue our show with very important things that are in the news, happening, or, you know, sometimes it's a fun show where we talk about fun things. But right now, our country is in serious trouble. And we have to make sure that we do our little part to get the word out.
And Gail, let's just remind people to email us.
Email us, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The email addresses will be shown, and we would love to get feedback from you so that we can have more diverse subjects, we can expand on others, and maybe bring up new things that maybe you might want to talk about, you might want us to talk about. So do email us, and thanks for watching. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.